Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. ISIS, Imitation of Life. The Goddess Next Door helps a young black girl overcome racism during the era of Jim Crow in this Golden Age ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Imitation of Life in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Last week, a statue of Frederick Douglass was torn down in Rochester, New York. Now, this statue was erected in 2018 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Frederick Douglass's birthday. And when I take a critical examination of this action to tear down this Frederick Douglass statue, it shows me how these protests by your Black Lives Matter and many others who support them have gotten completely out of control, and how they have been hijacked by individuals who are looking to push an anti-American agenda. Now, when I look at this incident, it really looks like something that possibly could have been done by some people on the far right who are angry because people on the far left have been tearing down statues of iconic historical figures like those who served in the Confederacy, and started to tear down statues of people like Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, and George Washington, who was the first American president, and your Christopher Columbus, who was alleged to have discovered the Americas. And it looks like some people, possibly on the far right or possibly on the far left, took to action to participate in either a tit for tat, where they tore down Frederick Douglass's statue on the far right, possibly to get back at those on the far left, or it looks like some of these crazy far leftists who have been tearing down statues based on their emotions wanted to go out here and tear down a statue of Frederick Douglass because they were angry about something he did in the past. So that's what it looks like to me, because these people, over time, they have gone from tearing down statues of Confederates and people who they allege are racist, like Christopher Columbus and George Washington, to tearing down statues of people who helped black people, like Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves, and people like Ulysses S. Grant, who fought in the Civil War to liberate people in those southern states. And tearing down Frederick Douglass is a deeply troubling turn, because when you're tearing down Frederick Douglass, this is one of the great icons in black history. Your Frederick Douglass was a man who escaped from slavery, went up north, established the first black newspaper, the North Star, and made great oratorical arguments in debates regarding slavery. And this man was one of the all-time greats of black history, but we have a group of people who are caught up in their emotions and caught up in their cancel culture, and what they want to do by tearing down these statues is so-called cancel history, not understanding that you cannot cancel history, because whatever has happened in the past has already happened. And when you try to cancel history, you're setting yourself up for future failure, because the reason why these statues are there is not just to celebrate these individuals, but for us to learn from these individuals' actions in the past, and to learn that even though these men have made great accomplishments that many may consider to be, whether it be racist or whatever it is, there's something for us to learn by reading and studying about these individuals and why they are represented as symbols in our society. So what we're seeing here is these people, they're just hijacking these movements. They're looking to use George Floyd's casket as a stepping stone into pushing their own personal and political agendas. And they're looking to go out here and use these figures' past actions that they allege were so bad as a justification to participating in their wanton violence. it's all about them trying to find a way to justify destroying somebody, whatever somebody built, destroying somebody's legacy. And I find it quite troubling that we have a statue of Frederick Douglass being torn down because it shows us how completely off the rails these protests have become and how these protests have lost their focus. I mean, I thought that these protests, the initial goal was to get justice for George Floyd, and these people dishonor your George Floyd by going out here and participating in this wanton violence where they're just destroying things for the sake of destroying things and destroying things just because they just want to. It just again shows me that there's the devil in these causes, and they're not thinking about, again, constructive action towards the goal. I mean, if you really wanted to get justice for George Floyd, it's not about tearing down a statue. It's about getting in front of that courthouse and letting those prosecutors know that they are not going to rig this game, and letting people know that you're going to keep pressing until you get the justice you want. Moreover, it's also about going on a drive to go out here and get people to vote, because your voting, again, is about trying to make sure that they're going to put in candidates that promote and push your agenda. Unfortunately, many of these people on the far left and the far right are so caught up in their emotions that they're not thinking about any sort of agenda for change, and all they want to do is participate in wanton destruction of these statues because it gives them a cathartic release. It allows them to be able to sate their feelings in the short term, but it does not change anything in the long term. Frederick Douglass is long dead and his legacy is cemented, so there's nothing that's going to happen except the municipality of Rochester having to go out here, file insurance claims, and replace this statue. And this statue is about Frederick Douglass and his contributions to Rochester, and again showing how a black man could go out here and do great things during the dark period of slavery. And to tear down that statue shows that these protests have just completely just lost all focus, lost all direction. And because when you have people who are protesting the murder of a black man tearing down the statue of another black man who fought against slavery and fought against injustice, it shows how completely lost and directionless these protests are, and how these protests have no real set of goals, no real set of direction, and no real agenda pushing it except a group of people running on feelings and the things that they heard from these social justice and echo chambers, and how these echo chambers are just doing damage because these people, they're running on these emotions based on things that make no logical sense, because it makes no logical sense to tear down a statue of Frederick Douglass, again, a man who was an escaped slave who came up from the north to Minnesota, then New York, and started the newspaper, the North Star, then went out here and was a master orator who spoke against slavery and was a brilliant man who is celebrated because of all of the great accomplishments he participated in during his life. That statue is there because Frederick Douglass was an icon as related to black history, and tearing his statue down makes no logical sense, and it just shows that we really have that the Black Lives Matter movement really is an anti-black man movement and an anti-American movement in some ways, because they're not saying anything about the destruction of this statue and showing respect for this black man's life. And it just again shows how lost this movement is and how directionless this movement is and how this movement really needs to get some perspective and how it needs to do something about all of these people who are completely out of control, because each action they participate in like this destroys the message of getting justice for George Floyd and destroys our ability to get justice for George Floyd, because that's supposed to be the goal long term, and that's supposed to be the goal we're supposed to be focused on. But the woke types are using this to push some of them their Marxist agenda, and some of them are using it to push their anti-American agenda. And black people have to stand up, push back, and let them know that if you're not here to protest George Floyd, then you need to leave this movement, because this movement is not about monuments. This movement is about getting justice for the murder of George Floyd, punishing those who murdered George Floyd, and setting standards to continue punishing these rogue police officers and these race soldiers and beta male suburban commandos, and set a hard line in the sand, letting them know that they will not destroy and take another black man's life in an arbitrary fashion, and that when you kill a black man, his life will have value to the point where you will receive a punishment in the American judicial system, and send a message to them that they will be held accountable for the murder of a black man. That should be the primary mission of all of these protests, and that should be the ultimate goal of these protests. Unfortunately, when you have dysfunctional leadership like there is in Black Lives Matter, it's all about everything else except the main goal, and that's why we need more black men to come out and speak out, because when you have people tearing down the statue of a black man who was an icon like Frederick Douglass, it is the same thing as going and spitting on the grave of a George Floyd. If you'd like to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the John Haynes series, which presents you a positive image of a black man, the ISIS series, which presents you a positive image of a black woman, the Easting series, which presents you a positive image of black women, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, which was requested by one of my viewers, you can donate to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.